morning and welcome to worship here at Elizabethtown Baptist Church. So glad you can join us this morning for worship. Now today we are going to look at the last word of the three words we've been talking about all week or all in this series. Now those three words are found on our Facebook page. They kind of help define who Elizabethtown Baptist Church is on Facebook. And those three words, you probably have them memorized by now: worship, grow, and serve. Now last week we talked about grow, and today we begin the first sermon on serve. Yes, we're going to talk about service next week as well. But today we're going to talk very specifically about serving God. Now I know you're thinking, Pastor Rudy, I know we should serve God. It's an easy thing. It's an easy decision to make. Yeah, you may think that, but there are a couple interesting stories in the Bible that lead me to believe that serving God, actually making a sound decision to serve God, making a heartfelt, making a committed decision to serving God is not as easy as we think it is. There's a story told in Joshua chapter 24, and the way that chapter begins is Joshua is telling the people of Israel about all the great things that God has done. He starts off at Abraham, and he talks about Isaac, and then he goes through Joseph, and then he talks about the people gathering in Egypt. And then he talks about the slavery that they had to go through in Egypt. But he also talks about the liberation, about the plagues in Egypt and the Red Sea and how God helped them overcome the Egyptian army. This speech actually takes place after the Battle of Jericho. And so Joshua also reminds the people of Israel of what God did at Jericho and how the walls fell. It's pretty amazing things, and Joshua talks about some pretty amazing things that God has done. But for some reason, the people are still confused about who they need to serve. And so this is what Joshua chapter 24, beginning at verse 14 says. It's Joshua 24, 14 through 16. This is what Joshua says: "Now therefore fear the Lord," as if he has to remind them that they have to fear the Lord. "Now therefore," says Joshua, "fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the rivers of Egypt. Serve the Lord," he says. "And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the rivers of Egypt, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house," says Joshua, "we will serve the Lord." Now you said, Pastor Rudy, that's an Old Testament thing. Certainly there wouldn't be any such struggle in the New Testament. Jesus, the Son of God, God incarnate, actually had the same struggle in the most powerful sermon ever preached, which was the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. Jesus, in Matthew 6:24, looks out to the crowd and he says, "No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot," says Jesus, "serve God and mammon." Now, Jesus was looking out to this crowd, but in this crowd were people like his own disciples. It wasn't just an Old Testament problem. There was an issue with New Testament, and I think that 2,000 years after Jesus spoke and about 3,500 years after Joshua spoke, we today are still having the same struggle. We have to choose who we're going to serve. I'm not talking just about non-Christians. I'm talking about people who've been Christians, for 20, 30, 40 years. Sometimes our own desires, our own agenda, our own wants, even things we qualify as our own needs, get put in front of Jesus, and we make those things more important than serving Jesus. Joshua is there looking out at the people of Israel who were well aware of what God has done. Jesus is there looking out at his disciples, well aware of who he is, and he says, listen, you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice between this world and me. You've got to make a choice between the gods that your fathers served. You've got to make a choice between the gods of Egypt or the gods of Amorites or the Amorites. Or today you have to make a choice between the gods of media. You have to make a choice between the gods of Netflix and streaming services and electronics and all those things that distract us from spending time with God. You got to make a choice between them and the God of the universe, the King of Kings, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I'm not afraid to say that, and you shouldn't be either. You got to make a choice. Again, it's not easy to serve. But that brings me to two things that I want to focus on just pretty quickly. The first thing I want to focus on is that you have to choose. I don't know if you noticed in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus doesn't speak to the entire crowd. He kind of personalizes it. He says, no one person, no individual can serve two masters. He's calling on that individual, meaning you, not the person next to you, not the person in the room with you, not your wife or your husband or not your children or your grandma or grandpa. You personally have to make this choice. You can't get to heaven, by the way, just to remind you on your grandma's faith. You can't get to heaven because your mama brought you to church all your life, even though you don't go now. You can't get to heaven because your husband or wife goes to church. You can't get to heaven on anybody else's merit or anybody else's decision. It's a choice that you have to make personally. It's an individual choice. Friend, I want to remind you of that. You'll hear me say this throughout my sermon series. You'll hear this throughout your relationship with me as you get to know me. But if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you choose. You choose today. And maybe you're in a family that isn't a Christian. Maybe you're in a family that's the opposite of Christian. Maybe you're somewhere far away. Maybe you're not even in North Carolina. Maybe you're not even in the United States. Maybe you're in a country that's not predominantly Christian, and the people around you aren't Christian. Friend, let me tell you that you still, as an individual, get to make that choice. And once you make that choice, no one else can take that choice away from you. No matter how much pressure there may be at school, no matter how much pressure there may be in your community, in your society, no matter how much pressure there may be in your nation, in your country, in your town, you can still, as an individual, make a choice to follow Jesus Christ. And that gets to be your choice. And He'll accept you any way you want to come to Him. Just as you are, the song says. You get to make that choice. It's a privilege, it's an opportunity. It also means that no one can keep you out of heaven. You get to make that choice. No one can keep you out of a relationship with Jesus Christ. You get to make that choice. The second thing I want to point out pretty quickly is when Joshua calls these folks to make this choice. And I believe that Jesus, time and time again, talks about the imminence. Joshua says, listen, you got to choose when? Today. You got to choose this day whom you're going to serve. You know, there's something that we don't talk a whole lot about sometimes because we don't want to offend anyone, but I'm just going to remind you of some facts. People die every day. Every day, 151,600 people die. By the way, these are pre-COVID numbers. And I don't want to take that lightly. So let me say, maybe more now. 151,600 people die every day. Just to give you an idea, that's 6,316 people an hour. And no, those aren't just old people. You know that as well as I do. In America alone, 900,000 people die prematurely from the 5 leading causes of death. And again, at this time, this is pre-COVID research, which are heart disease, cancer, chronic lower respiratory diseases, stroke, and unintentional injuries. 900,000 people every year die from those things. You yourself probably know someone who died before what you would consider to be their time. A child, a teenager, a person in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, a young person. The reality of our life is that tomorrow really isn't promised to anyone. And although we don't like to talk about it, there is a time limit on whether we choose to serve Jesus Christ or whether we choose to serve the things of this world, whether we choose to have a relationship with Him, or whether we choose to put Him aside and pay attention to ourselves. Francis Chan once wrote, he said, most of us say, I'm waiting for God to reveal His calling on my life as a means of avoiding action. Did you hear God calling you to sit in front of your television yesterday, says Francis Chan, or to go on your last vacation or exercise this morning? Probably not, he says, but you still did it. The point isn't that vacations or exercise are wrong, but that we are quick to rationalize our entertainment and priorities, yet we are slow to commit to serving God. God's always calling you to serve. He's always calling you to make that decision. And again, let me get just a little preachy with you. Today is a good day to make that decision. Because I can't promise that I'll see you tomorrow. Choose this day who you're going to serve. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Friends, just let me remind you of the basics of Christianity. As you consider service to God, that there is a God who loves you, that there is a God who desires to have a relationship with you. There is a God who desperately wants to walk alongside you, to be with you in your time of hurt and your time of pain. As you consider serving God, consider the gifts that He gives you. You say, but Pastor Rudy, God just wants too much of me. I promise you that whatever it is He wants of you, even if it is everything, which that's exactly what it is, He'll give you so much more. Maybe Joyce Myers puts it best. She says, serving God doesn't mean we'll no longer have difficulties. We're still on the battlefield. Serving God just means we don't have to fight the fight alone. Friend, let me invite you into service. Let me invite you to choose this day who you're going to serve. And let me remind you that the call to service is a call to the relationship, into a relationship with the one who will love you more than you can ever imagine. It's a call into a relationship with the King of the universe, a call into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Hope to see you soon. Amen. Hey folks, good morning again. We've got this shot today because I wanted you to see the pews behind me. And sometimes when you choose to make a huge decision like we talked about in our sermon today, you think that you're alone. But I want to remind you that you're not alone. That there are so many others who have made the same decision. There are so many others who have chosen to serve Jesus Christ over their own personal agendas, over their own personal desires and wants. Again, I want to encourage you to make that decision. If you want to talk a little bit more about what that decision means, feel free to reach out to Elizabethtown Baptist Church. I'll be glad to talk to you, or shoot me an email. If you've got a local friend or a local pastor you can talk to, feel free to talk to them as well. This is a life-changing decision Just remember to choose this day and choose service to Jesus Christ. He's worth it. And I'll talk to you soon.